This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter, welcome you to another sports catastrophe on this day. This is the only video for January 16th. There is no on this day. This is a birthday boy. So, anyhow. So today's birthday boy is a man who is now 53 years old, who actually was a former star boxer and actually owns dual American and Russian citizenship. Don't ask me why. But anyhow, he was a boxer for almost 3 decades. He held world championships in 4 weight classes: middleweight, super middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight. And the only boxer to go from start his career as light middleweight and then went on to win a heavyweight title. As an amateur, he was part of the 1988 U.S. Olympic boxing team, but of course he ended up silver in light middleweight when it should have been gold. Despite that, he's one of the best fighters pound for pound, and actually won the WBA heavyweight title in 2003, becoming the first former middleweight champion to win a heavyweight title in more than a century. He was the undisputed light heavyweight champion for a while. But anyway, Roy Jones Jr. is one of the best boxers around. So, Roy Jones Jr. was born to a family with boxing tradition. Roy Jones Sr. actually was a middleweight boxer himself and fought marvelous Marvin Hagler in 1977, but got knocked out. He went to the Olympics in the 156-pound weight class, being the youngest member of the U.S. boxing team. All that. He beat the Malawi boxer by KO. He had a unanimous decision against Michael Franek of the Czech Republic. He beat the Russian Zaitsev by unanimous decision. He beat the British boxer Woodall by unanimous decision. But then, somehow, in some way, he got taken out by Park Si-hung of South Korea by split decision. Unfortunately, Roy Jones Jr. just had bad luck. He was outboxing Park, and he was doing great. He landed 86 punches to Park's 32, which is one of the best moments around. However, the South Korean boxer actually apologized, saying he was dumbstruck by the judge's decision. One judge admitted that the decision was a mistake, and all 3 judges that voted against Jones were suspended. Marv Albert reported that 2 judges from communist countries scored for Jones, and the 2 boxers from Morocco and Uruguay favored Park. The 5th judge from Uganda scored the bout as a draw. It was the outcome to be decided on either criteria. There was an IOC investigation in '97 said that although the offending judges were actually wined and dined by South Korean organizers, there was no evidence of corruption. Jones was given the Phil Barker Trophy for Boxer of the 1988 Games, which was weird. The good news for this Roy Jones Jr. robbery was that it actually developed a new scoring system for Olympic boxing. And of course, the U.S. Olympic Committee thought something was fishy. The only reason why I think Korea got past the Americans that way was because of an incident in the 1984 Olympics involving a Korean boxer sitting out in the middle of the ring, and they must have gotten back at the U.S. for their mistreatment of Korea. Regardless, Roy Jones Jr. decided to become a professional and did pretty well for himself. Roy Jones Jr. did well. It made his first attempt at a world title in 1993, beating Bernard Hopkins to capture the IBF middleweight championship. Anyway, he would do pretty well for himself. He would then face James Toney, which was the undefeated IBF super middleweight champion for the pound for pound title and all that. Toney was undefeated. After 46 bouts. Jones was the underdog. Anyhow, Roy Jones Jr. put a unanimous decision on his opponent. 12 rounds. He would make lots of opponents and all that. He took down Vinny Pasticcia. And Pasticcia couldn't believe it. He just couldn't do it. But anyway. He maintained everything. Roy Jones Jr. beat Mike McCollum for the light heavyweight championship. The WBC one, of course. Jones Jr. was given the full champion when Fabrice Tiasso moved up to cruiserweight. Roy Jones would have a war with Montel Griffin, and even lost to Griffin, which was the first time he lost, but it was a disqualification. Jones ended up hitting Griffin twice when Griffin took a knee on the canvas. In the rematch, Jones got Griffin back. Jones kept his pound for pound title going and did pretty well for himself. Another key match is that Roy Jones Jr. in 2003 against John Ruiz, who was the WBA heavyweight champion, and Jones somehow won. It was weird that at 193 pounds, he was considered a heavyweight and would win a heavyweight belt and all that. So he did it, though, too. So Jones Jr. did his job. And then he took on Antonio Tarver, deciding to go back to the light heavyweight championship to retain the linear light heavyweight championship. Unfortunately, Jones Jr. shockingly lost to Antonio Tarver in a rematch. And then he tried to win the IBF light heavyweight title from Jan16, the Canadian. Unfortunately, he was knocked down in the 9th round. Then Roy Jones Jr. faced Tarver for a 3rd time, and Tarver won by unanimous decision. So logically, we all felt he was done for, but no, he kept winning and winning and winning. Faced Felix Trinidad in January 2008 at catchweight of 170 pounds, and Jones won the fight. And then he would take on Joe Calzaghe, and lost by unanimous decision. He started to keep getting losses and all that. So, unfortunately, by the time 2018 came along, he basically decided that was it. He did pretty good, 66 wins, 9 losses. But in the end, it was still a good pound pound for pound boxer. It was just the fact that, you know, he did so well. He started off his career 34-0 before losing to Montel Griffin by that disqualification. And after that, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't super good either. Anyway, he had a lot of pay-per-view fights. He was born in Pensacola, Florida. Unfortunately, Roy Sr. was very harsh on his son, with his verbal and physical violence against him. The funny thing was that Roy Sr. actually did everything possible to help kids, but towards his own son, he was merciless. And the weird thing is that Roy Jones Jr. met with Putin for dual Russian-American citizenship. Because he often visit Russia for business. But anyway, Roy and his wife have 3 children. Well, 3 sons, but they're not getting into boxing. So, Roy Jones Jr. was still a fantastic boxer who won 4 championships in 4 weight classes. Can't beat that. Anyway, I dropped out, but I do.